Hello and welcome to our third lesson in this topic on respiration. In the previous two lessons, we've looked at what respiration is and aerobic respiration. We've looked at how substances are transported around your body and in the body of other mammals. Today, we're going to look at how these chemicals are transported in a bit more detail. So today's title, as you would do for any other lesson, in your books you need to write transporting chemicals. By the end of the lesson you should be able to recall the word equation for aerobic respiration, you should be able to explain what tissue fluid is, and you should be able to link why heart rate and breathing rate increase with exercise. So let's refresh our memories to begin with, because it has been quite a while since we've looked at this. So aerobic respiration, and we'll neaten that C up, aerobic respiration can be defined as the release of energy, from glucose using oxygen. Now, all cells carry out respiration to release the energy so that they can use it. Okay? So, cells carry out respiration so that they can use it, or so that they can use the energy in cell processes. So things like growing, things like movement. Okay? Now, something that's really important that we need to point out here, and I can't remember if I mentioned it in the last video, but energy cannot be created or destroyed. Okay? So energy cannot be created or destroyed so it is not made in respiration. It is released. It is released. So don't say in your exam questions that energy is created. Energy cannot be created. It's released from glucose so that the cell can use it. Okay? Now, if we briefly write out the word equation for respiration, we've got oxygen being added to glucose. That's the worst G in the history of the world. Glucose. These are our reactants. When we add oxygen and glucose together in aerobic respiration, we get the release of products, which in aerobic respiration are carbon dioxide, plus water, and in brackets on the end of that equation we can put energy. We can't add energy to the word equation because energy isn't something you can hold. It's not a substance, okay? But this energy is used by the cells, okay? Now, we also said in the previous lesson that oxygen and glucose are carried to cells through blood vessels, okay? So we can say that the reactants for respiration are carried to cells via the blood inside blood vessels. Inside blood vessels. And this is where we got to last lesson. Now, when the blood gets to the cells where they need these reactants, the liquid part of the blood is pushed out of the blood vessel, forming something called tissue fluid. So we can say that we'll go for this colour, and we'll say the liquid part of the blood is pushed out of blood vessels carrying oxygen and glucose with it. Carrying oxygen and glucose with it. This brings us to our next keyword for this lesson, and a new one to you guys, the word tissue fluid. Tissue fluid. Now, tissue fluid can be defined as the liquid part of blood, the liquid part of blood pushed out of blood vessels, pushed out of blood vessels into surrounding tissues, into surrounding tissues carrying oxygen and glucose. Carrying oxygen and glucose. So let's have a look at what we've said so far. Aerobic respiration is the release of energy from glucose using oxygen. Cells carry out respiration so that they can use the energy in cell processes. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, so it's not made in respiration, it's released. The reactants for aerobic respiration are oxygen and glucose. The products are carbon dioxide and water. We should have products written under there. Energy is also released, but because it's not a substance you can hold with your hands, it's not a product of the reaction. We don't add it into the word equation, but we add it in brackets. The reactants for respiration are carried to cells via the blood inside the blood vessels. The liquid part of the blood is pushed out of blood vessels, carrying oxygen and glucose with it. This forms what's known as the tissue fluid. The tissue fluid is the liquid part of blood pushed out of blood vessels into the surrounding tissues, carrying oxygen and glucose. So, let's refresh this. Let's add in an image that I've prepared. The image is on the PowerPoint if you wish to use it, or the lesson slides. and it looks something like this. Make it a bit bigger. Now, if you look, this is where the tissue fluid carrying oxygen and glucose leaks out of the capillary, okay? These cells are all trying to carry out respiration. So we can write here, cells doing respiration. But once the cells have done respiration, they make waste carbon dioxide and waste water that needs to be gotten rid of. And what I'm going to do, because I've put that in the wrong place, and once I've set it down I can't change it, I'm just going to quickly put everything back. I'm going to add the image, and we're going to give myself a bit of room so that I can write next to it. Okay, so all we had so far was that these are cells respiring. Okay, now once the cells have oxygen and glucose, they carry out respiration, forming carbon dioxide and water. So once cells have oxygen and glucose, they carry out respiration, or aerobic respiration in fact. So they carry out aerobic respiration, forming carbon dioxide and water. Okay, now this carbon dioxide and water needs to be gotten rid of, mainly because carbon dioxide in large amounts is poisonous. Water, everybody always says in class when we mention water, so if I drink too much water, will I die? There are reports of people dying if they drink too much water and don't get rid of it. Okay? So we can then say in red that these waste products, and we'll put in brackets so that you know what I'm talking about, carbon dioxide and water, need to be gotten rid of. Okay. Now essentially what happens is that the carbon dioxide and water dissolve back into the tissue fluid, move back into the capillaries, where they're taken to the lungs and the kidneys so you can get rid of them. So we can say the waste products dissolve back into the tissue fluid before moving into the capillary. Okay, we can then say finally that carbon dioxide is sent to the lungs to be exhaled, and we can say that water goes to the kidneys to be urinated. An important point here is that it's the blood that carries both these substances. So we can just put a little thing there and say that the blood carries these to the lung or lungs / kidneys. Finally, our final keyword today is the word excrete. Excrete. And the word excrete means to get rid of waste. To get rid of waste. And that could be carbon dioxide via the lungs. So, e.g., carbon dioxide by the lungs. So once cells have oxygen and glucose, they carry out aerobic respiration. When they do this, they make waste products, carbon dioxide and water, that they need to get rid of. The waste products dissolve back into the tissue fluid that's surrounding each cell, which then moves into the blood. The blood then carries the carbon dioxide to the lungs, where you breathe it out, and it carries the water to the kidneys, where you urinate it out. To get rid of these waste products, we say that they are excreted. So you should now be able to recall the word equation for aerobic respiration. You should be able to explain what a tissue fluid is, and you should be able to link why the heart rate and breathing rate increase with exercise. That last one I haven't really touched upon, but I want you to be thinking about that because we're going to be covering it in upcoming lessons. So in the next 2 or 3 lessons, I want you to have a think about that before we cover it. Okay? So I hope this lesson has been useful. If you have any questions, either comment below in Google Classrooms or send me an email directly and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Until the next lesson, stay safe.